Kusile nebengwazi kamahlokohlana lomhla ekuseni angini ivusele kunamukela ehlelweni Kusile breakfast show solo sagcinana kulomnyaka lophelile sitawubuka ihlelo lethu lamhla ekuseni lutawuchubeka nje lube nje ngalamaviki lamabili lendlulile lube li-hour nje kuphela kodwa sitaba nato tindzaba tethu tesiswati siphindze sibe nato naleto letichamuka kulamanye emave sitawubahlola ke emakethe sase sibuya sibuka tesiswati talapha ekhaya.
Eswatini TV has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Eswatini Communications Commission. We are committed to reporting news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. For any complaints of our programming, please contact us on 2411-9600 or email info@eswatinitv.co.za. You can also contact the Eswatini Communications Commission on 2406-7000 or write a letter to ECCOM on PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Email address is info@ecom.org.za.
Sichubeka nalo lohlelo lethu leqala eminyakeni lomusha sibuka indzaba tesiswati umhlonishwa uNkulunkulu Russell Mmiso Dlamini uthi ke liyachubeka liyakhula lizinga lebantfu labasha labatfola lusito lwemali esikhwameni sekuthuthukisa abantu labasha. Umhlonishwa uNkulunkulu bekakhuluma emahhovisini elibandla letindvuna tembuso ngesikhathi yethula umbiko wekusebenta kwahulumende kulomnyaka losibuya kuye umnyaka wa 2025.
Live laseSwatini linebantfu labasha labalinganiselwa emashumini lasikhombisa ekhulwini 70% bese kuthi lizinga lekungasebenzi kwayo insha libe semashumini lasihlanu nesiphohlongo ekhulwini 58%. Umhlonishwa uNkulunkulu Russell Dlamini ngesikhathi etfulela umhlaba umbiko wekusebenta kwahulumende kulomnyaka lowephethako ngalesibili uvete ukuthi isikhwama sekuthuthukisa insha i-Youth Enterprise Revolving Fund siyetama kuvala lesikhebesi sekungasebenzi kwabantfu labasha.
The Youth and Enterprise Revolving Fund approved loans worth over 4.5 million emalangeni to beneficiaries this year, with 3.4 million emalangeni already disbursed to beneficiaries. A mentorship platform was established, pairing experienced business mentors with youth entrepreneurs. Government established a regional arts centers and structures in an effort to decentralize services. A recording studio was also established, giving artists a platform to record their craft. To support young people access white and blue-collar jobs, the Eswatini National Youth Council trained 115 youth on the development of professional CVs to improve the quality of their CVs, thereby positioning them to successfully apply for jobs. The Eswatini Youth Employment Opportunity Project, supported by the World Bank, was launched in 2025. The project aims to tackle youth unemployment and create income opportunities through skills training, especially in agriculture and value chains, and entrepreneurship support, and complements existing programs such as the Eswatini Youth Empowerment Program.
Umphathi walesikhwama Amandla Nkambule uthi lokwenyusa lelizinga lekutfola lemali kwabo bantfu labasha kulesikhwama ke sesifaka lihlelo lekufaka leticelo ngetindlela tebuchwephesha.
Lekusitile ukuthi sibone leti mali tinyuke in previous years we used to have what we call issue a call lokuthi bafake kanye siqalile ke kule mnyaka 2023 sacala lutshintsho lolukhulu ukuthi cha asebafake lama applications unyaka wonke kungabe ukutawu samametela bafake bese kuyamiwa sekubonile ke nalokuthi lokufaka unyaka wonke kuyasisita lokuthi kuhambise nalokuthi lama loan applications abo kube siwasebenzisa ngephuthuma ngelanga yangena iyasenjedo kusisite kakhulu ke naloko lokuthi kube continuous loan application sibese sithi cha ngoba kuyatshengisa ukuthi likhona leli sasasa bayafuna lokusebenza kepha lokukhulu bahlulwa ngilokho sebese ke sithi asesitshintshe lehlelo lethu nathi luhlelo lethu asesithi laqaleni asibafundzisi lesithi pre-loan application training sesifake yona ke laqaleni sisebenza kakhulu eshiselweni lapho besithi asesicale siyibude ukuthi tawusebenza yini where we have piloted this program.
Likusho kwembiko walesikhwama se-Youth Fund ingu-25 million imali lehlelo lemamfu labasha kulo mnyaka wa-2026 kanti-ke kuphindze kubuketwa nomthetho longamele ukusebenza kwalesikhwama kunciphisa le micabo lekhona levimbela yona insha ukuthi ingatholi le mali ngendlela lefanele. Lobikako nguSamkasiwe Khoza Sembabane.
Litiko letemfundvo seliucalile ke umsebenzi wekufuna tinkampani letawukwenta umsebenzi wekulungisa tikolwa letikhinyabetwe kakhulu tiphepho kulempelasonto kululekwa gwebo lobukete kuhlela itiko letemfundvo utsi tikolwa titawutsi tivulwa konke ke kutawube kume ngemumo gwebo bekanika umbiko ngetikolwa letikhinyabetwe siphepho.
Tikolwa letinenge letitsindzekile emayiwane enkundleni we are making effort lokuthi ti-addresseke siwatholile sina micro projects siwasendile sithinzele nema-contractors la ngaba ne-interest asibambise kulo msebenzi bayawubuka so now lama-contractors sidabe nje as of tomorrow micro project avula lama-expression of interest abo kwama-contractors then sidabe semva kwaloko sesiyabona ukuthi ngibaphi bakhola sibathola umsebenzi basibambise siyakhola ukuthi by mhla ka2 sitawukhona ukuthi siwamikise awethulaka letikolweni uqala umsebenzi uqhubeke loya phambili in trying ukuthi isikole tibe ti ready ngana kuvula tikolwa tithi sisebenze sitake sisibambisene njalo nabo contractor.
Kungasebenzisi tindzawo letifanele tekuwela umgwaco kubantu labahamba ngetinyawo ngiko ke lokuba ngatingoti temgwaco letinyenti letingavikeleka. Tsembani Dlamini lofundzisa ngekuphepha emigwacweni netiko letemsebenzi lemikhulu nekutfutsa utsi kungalandzeli imitsetfo yemigwaco ngiko lokubangela abantu labahamba ngetinyawo kutsi badale tingoti letigcina tihambe nangemiphefumulo. Dlamini bekakhuluma ngesikhatsi luhlangothi lwekuphepha ehlangothini lwetemgwaco lufundzisa sive sasembabane ngokusebenzisa umgwaco ngendlela lephephile.
Umbiko wemaphoyisa mayelana netingoti temgwaco wemnyaka wa 2024 uveta kutsi tingoti temgwaco 60% wato titsinza bantfu labahamba ngetinyawo. Kanti-ke luhlangothi lolubuke kuphepha emigwacweni yakuleli etiko letemsebenzi lemikhulu nekutfutsa kanye-ke nematiko labasebenzisana nawo likhumbuta-ke sive ngekuphepha edolobheni eMbabane. Tsembani Dlamini waleli tiko utsi lucingo lusiphatamiso lesikhulu nakubantfu labahamba ngetinyawo.
Sibonile ukuthi bahamba ngetinyawo noma sebefikile endzaweni yokuwela abayisebenzisi kahle nayo. Phindze futhi nje abanatshela nje ukuwela umgwaco. Likakhulu kade sikubona kusiphatamiso lesikhulu lucingo luhlala nje vele endlebeni kodwa umuntu uyowela wena-ke umgwaco. Kucela nje ukuthi lohamba ngetinyawo akejwayele ukuthi asahamba emgwacweni kufuna awunake umgwaco ngokufuna abeke icingo eceleni bese sowufocus nje kulokuthi awele umgwaco kuqinisekisa ukuthi ufika ngeshiya kwemgwaco ufika kahle. Lesinye indzawo khanze ukuthi kunema robot uma ngabe ufika lapho kunedibane khona lokubalekile ukuthi kufuna utibuke le dibane uwele ngalesikhathi libovu ngoba bawutowela isikhathi lilihlata leli robot imoto shothi nale khashane itogijima ifune ukuthi yenze kulowo mgwaco lo kanti nawe sowubukile ukuthi kude imoto sowudingela emgwaqweni lapho uzothola-ke seyikushayisa le moto kalokuthi awukayiboni.
Thulani Msibi oluhlangothi lwetekuphepha emgwaqweni emaphoyiseni uthi sive saya emicimbini singakhohlwa kunaka timpawu temigwaco.
Singacela-ke eMaswati ukuthi asayayite inkonzweni noma asayayite indzaweni tekutijabulisa bahambe babe ngilabaphephile ikakhulukazi tona labaqhuba timotolo bangabalayishi bantfu bagqwale nabo laba emasontveni bangabalayishi bagqwale ngoba nababalayishi abagcwala bese sekubanga ukuthi imoto ingalawuleki nakuthi-ke mhlawumbe kukhona indzawo letsite lesifuna kuya kuyo siyojuba umnyaka asheshe sisuke singanawo bese sesishaywa sikhathi sisendleleni segcina imoto seyiyagijima ngekwekuthi sifuna kubamba isikhathi sekuthi kujutshwe umnyaka sesifikile.
Ngekusho kwembiko wemaphoyisa uhulumende ulahlekelwa imali lenganga 5.6 million emalangeni njalo ngeminyaka ngetingoti letihamba nemphefumulo tiphindze-ke tilimate takhiwo. Kubika Sondomlangeni nasamkelisiwe Khoza eMbabane.
Umcondzisi weluhlangothi lolubuke emacala ekukhwabanisa emaphoyiseni Nicholas Tshele uthi even sekwanze emacala ekukhwabanisa etinkundleni tekuchumana nekuhlambalatana kuto-ke tinkundla tekuchumana. Tshele uthi lo mbutfo ucinisa tinhlelo tekulandzelela lolu hlobo lwemacala ekukhwabanisa lebonakala anza even.
Uma silandzela singesimaphoyisa sithole ukuthi lo muntu kuyawukhanza sikuncane kakhulu kuyikota lokufike kuye nangabe kukhona lokufikile. Lokunengi sebatisebenzisela bona. Sithi-ke sicela kuwacwayisa eMaswati kuleti ndzaba letinjengaleto bekunene kwekuthi awu asivele sicaphele kakhulu kati kulabo bantfu labafuna lusito lwebantfu labatsite bekunene simane sitenetise kwekuthi ngabe lento iliciniso yini. Kepha nje asibonge kakhulu kubambisana naso sive seMaswati ngoba kulamacala lamabili nje lesinawo. Kusukume sona sive seMaswati sakhona kusincinta indlebe noma kusiluma indlebe kwekuthi kukhona timali letikole kwako lokuthiwa lusito lolutsite kubantfu labatsite kodwa lolusito ligcina lingefiki kulabantu. Sisaswacwayisa eMaswati bekunene sikubucala lopho. Kokuqala nje sine sivele sikucharge ngelicala lesithi theft by false pretenses ngoba wente sengazuthi uyawusita umuntu lotsite kani ufuna kuba ngigubhela kwesakho. So sithi asiwacwayise ke eMaswati kulobo bucala lobu njengalobo. Vele la lesiwaphenya konje bekunene kutawukwendeka ukuthi abantu bavele embi kwemthetho noma embi kwetinkantolo babhekane nalawo maqala labawendile. Sisasisekhute sive seMaswati naso sive bekunene uma sitawunikela etinhlelo etinjengaleto asihlolisise kwekuthi ngabe vele kuliciniso yini. Nekusicela sona sive seMaswati ukuthi asichubeke siwancinte noma siwalume indlebe emaphoyisa embube etinhlelo etinjengaleto bekunene ukuze kwekuthi sive seMaswati singasebenziseki kabi ekutheni intimali taso sigcine setingene emigodzini lenjengalena bekunene.
Kube nenjabulo lenkulu ngesikhathi gogo sicashaza wasenzaweni yasesiphocosini yemukela indlu yakhe leyakhelwe ngumbanenkosi Japani. Lokho-ke kulandzela ukuthi gogo sicashaza bekahlala endlini lengasiyo esimeni lesikahle beyingakathe-ke imgcobe noma ngabe kunini.
Bese kuphele iminyaka gogo sicashaza ahlala endlini beyingekho esimeni lesikahle. Lendlu nawo ngekhathi bewubona konke lokwendekako ngephandle kanti-ke bekahle agcotshwa natitini. Simo sasekhaya kagogo sicashaza akusiso lesikahle njengoba nakati ulala etiko. Sikhulu sasesiphocosini umbanenkosi Japani welule sandla wakhela gogo indlu. Umbanenkosi uthi ukukhanze kumcoka kakhulu kunakekela abantfu labadzala.
Wasifika ngelanga-ke bengilele lapho wafika wathi ugcotshwe etitini ulimele ufuna ucela imali kuyesibhedlela. Angizange ngibika-ke nale ekhaya hawu ngisho ngibuthi uthi ugcotshwa etitini kwendekeni bathi ugcotshwe indlu yakhe lalala kiyo. Ngingabiki-ke nale ekhaya ngivele ngithathe iveni ngithathe bafana sihambe side la masifika la sikhanze simo sesibi njengoba kubonakala nayo nje indlu balala kiyo. Benyama yasithuma ukuthi awu asibambise singababukeli bomakela abahluphekile sibambise yona njenga DPM nje uhamba lonke lelivu yakhe.
Maseko losakhamuti sendzawo yasesiphocosini ubonga lusito loluchamuka kuye umbanenkosi.
Sibonga kakhulu kumbanenkosi wasesiphocosini lo uvile ingwenyama nayibathuma ukuthi abayawugatsa sive ukuthi kumane bantfu labadzala nalase bakhubatekile bangagcotshwa luphahla Sibonga kakhulu nje kuye umntwana enkosi ungathi abengete agcina la kulesigodi sasesiphocosini lesilangube. Ungathi angendlulela nakulabanye.
Gogo Sicashaza wendlulise kubonga kakhulu washo nekuthi sebutawehla buphongo njengoba sekatolala endlini le kahle.
Jabula kakhulu Nkosi yami. kuNkulunkulu lozamile ukuthi Jesu angakhe noma amadolo ami agobana noma acinilana noma sekagedletela. Kepha yena wathi ngoba uNkulunkulu uthi khonza mina ngikweliciniso nami ngizokukhonza. Ungangingabadi ngoba nama ungabada kimi nami ngiyongabada.
Lusito lendlu yagogo lufike ngesikhathi kunetimvula letinengi lelimata nempahla yesive. Umsebenzi nofana nalona loletha lusito esuveni uphindze ubambise nahulumende. Kubika Nompendulo Shabalala, Anasikhumbuzo Dlamini, Esiphocosini.
Indvodza leyaKhatindlu iboshiwe kulandzela kutsi yebe timpombi esitolo sase-Cashbuild edolobheni laseNhlangano. Le ndvodza ijele enkantolo kutsi beyifuna kuyawutifaka emathangeni ekhaya letimpombi.
Umsolwa longumelusi lushaba loneminyaka lengu-24 wasensenga uvele embi kwenkantolo yamanje enhlangano bekwalicala lekweba. Kuthiwa lo msolwa ungena esitolo sase-Cashbuild hardware lesedolobheni enhlangano ebatimpombi letine letibita imali lingu-679 nomalangeni. Kuthiwa lo msolwa wendele licala mhla ka-20 Disemba 2025. Akhuluma enkantolo lo msolwa uthi bekete kasibali wakhe kahlatsi kutowenta i-Peace Job lapho akha khona indlu. Lo msolwa uthi wathi nakaya kule sitolo enhlangano wasewehlelwa ngilesilingo. Inkantolo yembuto ukuthi wadebelani letimpombi. Lo msolwa uphendvule wathi kunamathangi ekhaya lapho befuna kutifaka khona kepha bekete imali yokutitsenga. Inkantolo ithe kweba kulicala lelimatima nesigwebo kufuna sibe ngilesicinile. Inkantolo ithe lo msolwa utakhipha inhlawulo yemali lengu-2000 nomalangeni noma hlale ejele tinyanga leti12. Ngetulu kwalokho kumele anciphetele lesitolo sase-Cashbuild ngemali lengu-679 nomalangeni. Kanti kulokunye umsolwa longulungile Msibi loneminyaka lengu-21 wokugege uboshelwe licala lokuba speaker saka-JVC lesibita imali lengu-300 omalangeni. Kuthiwa lo msolwa wendele licala mhla ka-20 Disemba edolobheni enhlangano. Inkantolo ibute lo msolwa ukuthi wasebelani le-speaker. Lo msolwa uphendvule wathi walingeka abetitshele ukuthi utawudlala ngaso tingoma le-speaker. Inkantolo ithe lo msolwa sewutifake enkingeni ngoba nyalo sekumele imgwebe ngalesento sakhe. Inkantolo ithe lo msolwa utawukhipha inhlawulo yemali lengu-500 omalangeni noma hlale ejele tinyanga letisihlanu. Kubika Thandokuhle Mdluli, Nhlangano.
Etindzabeni temidlalo, mengameli wenhlangano lengamele imidlalo yetikolwa zakhele emiyeni uthi umnyaka wa-2025 kube ngumnyaka lomuhle kakhulu kubo bayenhlangano njengoba ke bakhonile kudlalisa imidlalo lehlukahlukene etikolweni, ikakhulu umdlalo webhola we-Instacash lowasita emacembu ebhola lamakhulu ekuthenini yakhone kubona abadlali. Miyeni bekakhuluma nalo msakato ngelucingo.
Inhlangano lengamele imidlalo etikolweni ingulenye yetinhlangano temidlalo letibonakala etihamba embili eminyakeni wa-2025 nakubukwa imicutsulwano lekhonile ukuthi ibambe kanzi. Akuleyo micutsulwano lokufaka ikhatsi lomkhulu wemidlalo webhola yetikolwa losekelwe inkampani i-Instacash lowabona nemsakato ye-Eswatini TV usayina isivumelwano sekusakata lemidlalo kusuka esigabeni sama-semi-finals kuya kumancamu.
Games which are the regional games ala kuSadak lokho kwentekile nanabo with the help of Minister of Education and Training kanye na Sports Council. Siyabonga kakhulu nje nakulabo labasibambisile. So 2025 ngisho ukuthi ku-school sports ube ngumnyaka lokhombe kuba successful kakhulu. Ngicabanga ukuthi highlight lenkulu lesingaba nayo lesiyikhumbula sonke ngunayi i-collaboration lenkulu yaSwazi TV kanye na-school sports. Le collaboration leyo ikhombe ukuthi idonse abantu labanengi ngoba abantu bese bakhona kulanzelela imidlalo yetikolwa sathi baze bakhona nekuyofika bagcwalise nange amavuso. cabanga ukuthi singamaswati sitawukhumbula sonke lokuthi kwendeka namavuso lapho khona bese nama-finals against-national schools.
Myeni uphindze waveta ukuthi eminyakeni lotako bafisile ukungenela kule minye imidlalo kutsi benemigcudzelwano lemikhulu lefana nayo ibhola.
School sports sithi thina yonke imidlalo siyiphatha ngakufana. Kodwa-ke bantu even nabo somabhizinisi into yokucala labaye bathanda ukuyisekela ngilena ledonsa abantu labaningi. Sidawati-ke ukuthi umhlaba wonke vele ibhola ibonakala ingiyo ledonsa abantu abaningi baye kuyoyibukela. Kodwa-ke ekukhuleni kwethu singu-school sports, Q-sport njengoba sombalile naye sinaye, rugby sinaye, netball ukhona, volleyball ukhona, basketball ukhona, darts, that is bakhona nabo. So cishe maningi lama-associations, chess sinayo i-chess, so nakhona we organize ukuthi bantwana bakhona kudlala. So siyakhula nje kancane nalabanye basasho bo-handball ukuthi nabo bacela kungena, bo-table tennis nabo bacela kungena ukuthi bakhona ukuthi badlalise abantwana. So siyakhula kancane siyethemba ukuthi by 2026 labaningi babo sitabe sesisayinile leto thumelana sebakhona organize ama-competitions.
Myeni uphethe ngekudumisa abadlali labakhombisa likhono labo emidlalweni yetikolwa lasebadlalela emacembu ka-Premier League kanye naka-First Division. Lobikako Linda Dlamini, Embabane.
Sitophetha kanjalo teswati sitawubahlola imakethe sitawubuya sibukele sichamuka ngephandle kwalapha eveni.
When you choose your adventures, you do so with an open heart and a desire for the unexpected. You embark on journeys to discover new worlds full of wonder. You choose a path to awaken your senses, a world to make you look up and realize just how inspiring this life can be. Arrive and awaken your heart. Explore life in ways only thought possible in your dreams. Discover just how far you'll go to expand your understanding of life's greatest mysteries. There's just one place on this planet with so much to offer. Now is the time for you to have the royal experience.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at some of the international stories making headlines around the world. In an overnight strike, the Saudi military hit a Yemeni port, saying that they were neutralizing a weapons shipments arriving from the United Arab Emirates and meant for the STC separatist group. Now, the UAE has denied the shipment contained weapons and claimed that the vehicles were not intended for any groups. Both countries have supported the fighting sides in the over-decade-long war in Yemen, but this strike has turned this rivalry into an open dispute.
It was a targeted strike. As Yemenis put out any lingering flames on the charred carcasses of armored vehicles, the bombing is a sign of increased tensions between Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates over the groups that they support in the over-decade-long war in Yemen. In an overnight hit, the Saudi military bombed a limited area of the strategic port of Mukalla. They say they were neutralizing weapons and combat vehicles that had arrived from the United Arab Emirates and that were meant for the separatist group, the Southern Transitional Council, or the STC. For the kingdom, the UAE's support of the STC and its actions in Yemen are a threat to Saudi national security.
Any infringement upon or threat to our national security is a red line. The kingdom will not hesitate to take all necessary steps and measures to confront and neutralize it.
For the Yemeni Presidential Council, which is backed by Saudi Arabia, the arms delivery fuels internal strife.
This constitutes an escalatory step against the security and stability of the governorates of Hadramaut and Al-Marah.
Since 2015, the Saudi-backed Yemeni Council has been in conflict with the Iran-backed Houthi rebels. The separatist group STC was initially part of that Saudi-led alliance against the Houthis, but it decided to split from it. Now seeking self-rule in the south and to recreate an independent state of southern Yemen, it has in recent weeks been gaining ground. The UAE has denied the accusations. They say the shipment did not contain any weapons and that the vehicles were not intended for any Yemeni groups. Nonetheless, the incident further strains ties between Riyadh and Abu Dhabi, which now back competing sides in Yemen.
People gathered in several towns in the breakaway region of Somaliland on Sunday to celebrate its recognition by Israel, a decision condemned by the Somali president as a threat to stability in the Horn of Africa. Israel's recognition of Somaliland was criticized by the African Union, Egypt, Turkey, the Six-Nation Gulf Cooperation Council, and the Saudi-based Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and the European Union insisted Somalia's sovereignty should be respected.
In this stadium in the city of Hargeisa, Somaliland's de facto capital in northern Somalia, people gathered in their thousands to celebrate the official recognition of the state of Somaliland by the State of Israel. While some celebrated, others protested as the news quickly divided the country. That same evening in the capital Mogadishu, Somalians voiced their anger.
We came to this rally in response to the offence committed by Israel against the sovereignty of our country.
We are gathered here because we oppose Israel's actions against our country, which aim to divide us. We say to Israel that you have broken international laws as well as diplomatic codes.
Somalia's president was quick to condemn the move in parliament, saying that Benjamin Netanyahu's recognition of the territory was an act of illegal aggression.
We tell the world the infringement committed by Netanyahu and his attempt to divide the Federal Republic of Somalia endangers the peace and tranquility of the world and the region.
A number of countries across the globe have since voiced their opposition as well. The European Union called for respect of Somalia's unity. Somaliland declared its independence from Somalia in 1991. The self-proclaimed republic is strategically placed on the Gulf of Aden. It has its own money, passports and army. Until Israel's announcement, it had failed to be recognized by any UN member states.
More than a year after the fall of Bashar al-Assad, images of the former dictator persist throughout Syria, not least on the country's banknotes. On December 30, the country's current president, Ahmed al-Shara, announced that the introduction of new notes, which will no longer bear the likeness of Assad or his father Hafez for the country, it is an opportunity to turn the page on a long, painful period, but also to bring economic stability to a country that has been weakened by 13 years of civil war.
He's no longer president, but Bashar al-Assad still lingers on Syria's banknotes. But that will all change from the 1st of January. On Monday, President Ahmed al-Shara revealed the new series of notes on which oranges, olives and other horticultural produce will replace the likeness of the former dictator.
Bringing in the new currency marks the closure of a phase that no one will regret ending, and the beginning of a new chapter that Syrian people and the people of the region aspire to.
Since the fall of Assad in December last year, the new Syrian authorities have been trying to stabilize the country's economy. 13 years of civil war collapsed the Syrian pound, and inflation in the country was rampant. Two £5,000 notes, the highest available denomination, are now equivalent to $1. This means citizens are forced to carry around large wads of cash, even to purchase basic goods. In an effort to address this, 2 zeros will be removed from the new notes.
The removal of 2 zeros from the new currency does not mean an improvement of the economy or the exchange rate, but is meant to ease its use in society.
The government has not said where the new banknotes are being made. The old notes were printed in Russia, an ally of the former president, and where he sought refuge after fleeing last year.
With the animated film David breaking records, the South African studio which produced it wants to showcase the growing local film industry, the continent's strongest in the sector. Released in South Africa and the United States, the faith-based animated film follows the biblical figure David in his fight towards the giant Goliath.
This is the latest animation of the story of David and his battle against the giant Goliath. The director worked on the screenplay for more than 10 years and traveled to Israel 4 times to ensure the authenticity of the story. Produced in South African studios, the production involved hundreds of people to bring the story to life.
We had people leave Pixar and Disney and DreamWorks to come and join the project. Some of them moved their families here to Cape Town, and others we just worked remotely with them. So we worked with 27 different countries at the height of the movie.
Proof of the growth of South African cinema, the studio raised over $3 million in pre-sales for this animation.
It was a journey of funds coming in, not enough funds, using what we had in the moment. So we just took it step by step and in faith.
Technology is changing so quickly at this moment, which means your competition barriers are coming down, which is awesome. So I think Africa is going to birth some beautiful stories that are going to touch the world.
South Africa's animation industry is the most advanced in Africa. At this animation school, an annual festival showcases young talent. Kabelu created her own series, The Adventures of a High School Student named Roy Sang, but the road to success remains long.
The only reason why I have a studio is because I couldn't find a job, so I registered a company and I started a studio 8 years ago, and now we are a team of 10.
And you need the audience to be able to show the global market that there is animation in South Africa that is created in South Africa with a global appeal.
David has been released in South African and American cinemas this December, with releases in the rest of the world scheduled from March next year.
U.S. actor and British Lebanese international human rights lawyer George and Amal Clooney have become French citizens after they were naturalized with their 2 children. Now, the family bought a house in a vineyard in the south of France in 2021 and have become involved in the local life. Now, the naturalization of the Clooneys comes as some Americans, including a number of celebrities that are seeking citizenship in European nations, partially motivated by the Trump administration.
He says his French isn't up to par.
My French is horrible.
No.
It is horrible. So I'm learning, but I don't have it very good yet.
The French government has announced that the Hollywood star George Clooney and his family are now French citizens. As published in the Journal Officiel of the 27th of December, George Timothy Clooney, along with his wife, Amal Alamuddin, and their 8-year-old twins, Ella and Alexander, they've been naturalized French. 4 years ago, in 2021, the Clooneys bought this house on a vineyard. Located in Brignoles in the Var department in Provence, it is estimated to be worth some 9 million euros. Clooney has said that while they have a house in the U.S., their happiest place and primary residence is on the farm in France.
I drive them to school. There are laws against taking pictures of your kids here, which they don't exist in the United States. We wanted to have a place where we could have some safety for our kids and wanted them to have a normal growing up, and it feels like they're having a pretty normal life right now, so we're very lucky.
Hello, bonsoir. While Clooney says privacy and no paparazzi at the school gates is the top priority, he has also become involved in his town of 17,000 people. Last year, he helped inaugurate a new movie theater, much to the joy of local fans. The Clooney's naturalization comes as some Americans, including a number of celebrities, are seeking citizenship in European nations. Be it for the quality of life, an alternative to living under the Trump administration, family or professional ties, many say there is an Amera exit underway. And Georges, spelled without an S, got his citizenship just before stricter French language requirements go into effect on January 1st.
All right, that is how we end our international news. We'll go for an ad break, and we'll be back with an update from the United Nations.
Eswatini TV has signed a code of conduct
that is enforced by the Eswatini Communications Commission. We are committed to reporting news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. For any complaints of our programming, please contact us on 2411-9600 or email info@eswatinitv.co.sz. You can also contact the Eswatini Communications Commission on 2406-7000 or write a letter to ECCOM on PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Email address is info@ecom.org.sz.
Welcome back. As tension between the United States and Venezuela heightens, UN senior official Khaled Chiari reiterated dialogue is the only viable path toward lasting peace and preventing further instability and human suffering. Those were his words. The United States military presence and operations in the southern Caribbean off the coast of Venezuela have increased since the Council last discussed the situation on the 10th of October. Khaled Chiari, the Assistant Secretary General for the Middle East, Asia and the Pacific, told Council members.
The United States military presence and operations in the southern Caribbean off the coast of Venezuela have increased since this Council last discussed the situation on 10th of October, further heightening tensions between the two countries. The United States described its military deployment as part of a, quote, non-international armed conflict, end quote, against drug cartels and drug trafficking, invoking Article 51 of the Charter of the United Nations. President Donald Trump has stated that he is going to use the full power of the United States to take on and eradicate these drug cartels, no matter where they are operating from. The Venezuelan government, including its permanent representative, has described the measures by the United States as a serious threat to international peace and security. Most recently, in a letter dated 16 December and addressed to the President of the Security Council, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Venezuela asserted that the United States is violating the principle prohibiting the threat or use of force in international relations. Mr. President, U.S. strikes on vessels alleged to be illegally carrying drugs in the southern Caribbean Sea and the eastern Pacific have continued. According to United States authorities, 105 individuals have been killed in these strikes since 2 September. Officials have stated that the strikes have taken place in international waters or in the Southcom area of responsibility. The exact locations of these incidents have not been disclosed. In a statement on 31st October, the High Commissioner for Human Rights said that the airstrikes by the United States of America on boats in the Caribbean and the Pacific, allegedly linked to drug trafficking, violate international human rights law. The High Commissioner added that countering illicit trafficking of drugs across international borders is, as has long been agreed among states, a law enforcement matter governed by the careful limits on lethal forces set out in international human rights law. He called for prompt, independent, and transparent investigations. Mr. President, in late November, President Nicolas Maduro and President Trump held a telephone conversation. On 24th November, the United States designation of the Cartel de los Soles as a foreign terrorist organization entered into force under U.S. law. Subsequently, the United States imposed additional measures against organizations and individuals it alleges are linked to these activities. On 29 November, President Trump declared that the airspace above and around Venezuela should be considered closed in its entirety. This followed an alert issued by the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration a few days earlier, warning major airlines of a potentially hazardous situation when flying over Venezuela. Since then, most international airlines have suspended or canceled flights to and from the country. Venezuelan authorities have described this as an attempt to impose an air blockade. The International Civil Aviation Organization issued a statement on 1st of December recalling that, and I quote, Article 1 of 1944 Convention of International Civil Aviation recognizes that every state has complete and exclusive sovereignty over the airspace above its territory, end of quote. The statement further noted, and I quote, any state can issue any information to its own operators regarding risks for flights over or in proximity of any geographic zones, including of another state, end of quote. On 10 December, tensions increased further when President Trump announced that the United States had seized an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela, stating that the government of Venezuela was using oil to finance criminal activities. He also declared that, and I quote, the Venezuelan regime has been designated a foreign terrorist organization under United States law and ordered the total and complete blockade of all sanctioned oil tankers going into and out of Venezuela, end of quote. Subsequently, the United States authorities imposed sanctions on 6 shipping companies operating in Venezuela's oil sector and 6 vessels allegedly associated with these companies, which the US claims have engaged in deceptive and unsafe shipping practices. Venezuelan authorities described these actions as a unilateral naval blockade. In identical letters dated 17 December and addressed to the Secretary General and the President of Security Council, the permanent representative of Venezuela stated that the US actions violate Venezuela's national sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence. The letter further asserted that the naval blockade imposed unilaterally constitutes a violation of international law. In recent days, reports indicate that the Venezuelan Navy has been escorting ships departing its ports with petroleum products. On 20 December, the United States interdicted another tanker off the coast of Venezuela that was transporting oil from Venezuela. According to a United States announcement, the vessel was suspected of carrying oil subject to sanction under US laws. On 20 December, US Coast Guard pursued a 3rd oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela. Reportedly, the ship did not submit to boarding during the attempted interdiction and continued sailing away from the Caribbean Sea. US actions have received support from some regional allies, but other member states within and beyond the region have voiced concern over the militarization of the Southern Caribbean and stressed the importance of respecting national sovereignty and international law. Several member states have echoed call for de-escalation and dialogue to address ongoing tensions. Mr. President, Excellencies, in September, citing external threats, President Maduro enacted a decree expanding the government's emergency powers. Public life has become further militarized, while Venezuelans continue to face serious human rights concerns and socioeconomic challenges. The UN Human Rights Office reported coerced enlistment into the Bolivarian militia, including adolescents and older persons. The High Commissioner has also reported on sweeping restrictions on freedom of expression and peaceful assembly, arbitrary detention and enforced disappearances, as well as acute social and economic strain. He called for an immediate end of enforced disappearances, incommunicado detention, and unauthorized transfers of detainees to unknown locations. The High Commissioner further reiterated the disproportionate impact of broad sectoral sanctions on Venezuela's most vulnerable populations, noting that these measures also hinder the work of human rights and humanitarian organizations. He called for the sanctions to be reassessed and lifted. Venezuela's economy was already extremely fragile, with soaring inflation, currency instability, and widespread income erosion. Millions are unable to meet basic needs. Recent air and maritime restrictions, along with reduced exports, risk further constraining the government's fiscal ability to deliver basic public services. As the humanitarian situation deteriorates, the United Nations and its partners continue to work and deliver assistance in support of the Venezuelan people, including through recent financial allocations of the United Nations Central Emergency Response Fund and the Venezuela Humanitarian Fund. Mr. President, on 17 December, at his request, President Maduro held a telephone conversation with the Secretary General. The Secretary General reaffirmed the United Nations position on the need for member states to respect international law, particularly the United Nations Charter, exercise restraint, and de-escalate tensions to preserve regional stability. The Secretary General stands ready to support all efforts at diplomatic engagement, including the exercise of his good offices, if both parties so requested. He welcomes initiatives by member states, offers for mediation, and proposals for peaceful solutions. Dialogue is the only viable path toward lasting peace and preventing further instability and human suffering. Thank you, Mr. President.
Joyce Msuya, the Assistant Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, echoed concerns about instability and funding shortfalls. She said recent violence underscored the fragile situation. And I quote, last week's attack in Palmyra and other suspected ISIL attacks in recent months also illustrate the fragile situation in many areas. She said, adding that such violence undermines prospects for development and investment.
I now give the floor to Ms. Joyce Msuya.
Thank you, Mr. President. Syria continues to navigate immense opportunities and complex challenges, many of which have just been set out clearly by Under-Secretary General Di Carlo. But today, the hope that was kindled a year ago continues to radiate. Vigorous and diligent international support remains vital. The success of Syria's transition will depend on many measures. Two of them stand out. The first is a reduction in the level of need in what has been, for more than a decade, one of the world's largest humanitarian crises. The second, linked to this, is a reduction in the size of what has for years been one of our largest humanitarian operations. Today, I want to acknowledge the real progress and opportunities we have seen along this path during the past year, but also the major work still to do. Mr. President, one of the most powerful signs of the hope and confidence that Syrians have for their future has been the steady flow of those returning to their homes after being uprooted by conflict for years. 2 million people displaced within Syria have returned, many after living for years in camps in precarious conditions. Over 1.3 million more have returned from neighboring countries. Many of these families are returning to homes that are damaged or destroyed and to communities with few basic services or job opportunities. They will continue to rely on humanitarian aid in the near term to meet basic needs. Meanwhile, millions more remain displaced across Syria. A majority of those in camps are hesitant to return in the coming year due to lack of adequate housing, basic services like water and electricity, and access to jobs. They too will continue to rely on humanitarian aid, especially during these cold winter months. Mr. President, the current moment has given Syria the opportunity to finally bring down these needs. But for this to happen at pace and at scale, we need three key things from this Council and the wider international community. First, we need attentive diplomacy to de-escalate and resolve ongoing flashpoints and to prevent new fighting. Levels of violence have reduced dramatically in Syria, but sporadic hostilities continue. Over 155,000 people remain displaced from their homes following fighting in Aswada in July. At the end of November, 13 people were killed and 2,000 were impacted due to clashes and airstrikes during an Israeli military operation in Beit Jin in rural Damascus. Last week's attack in Palmyra and other suspected ISIL attacks in recent months also illustrate the fragile situation in many areas. Beyond the immediate human impact, such as violence robs Syria of the stability that will enable desperately needed investments in development. Second, we need support for such investments. Syria has made remarkable strides reintegrating with the international community. This includes the easing of unilateral sanctions by a range of countries. Humanitarians have long been able to operate at scale in Syria thanks to Resolution 2664 and similar exemptions under most unilateral sanctions regimes. The easing of sanctions should further facilitate procurement and transactions of our operations. More importantly, such steps are opening the door to Syria's economic reintegration with the region and the world, and to critical investment in its recovery and reconstruction. But such resources will take time and sustained political will to mobilize, and their impact will take even longer to unfold. Mobilizing tangible and targeted development finance, including to ensure the most vulnerable are not left behind, and rebuilding confidence in Syria's legal, financial, and security environment will also be critical to bringing down humanitarian needs. The transition from humanitarian aid to longer-term recovery and reconstruction will require support from a wide range of partners in support of government-led efforts. For the UN's part, a new Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework is being developed to channel UN development and recovery efforts in the coming years, aligning support with Syrian national priorities. In the meantime, where we can, the UN and partners will continue to prioritize humanitarian activities that also advance recovery. Mr. President, given the scale of the needs and the time required for development efforts to take hold, we also need support to sustain and expand the flow of humanitarian assistance in the near term. During the past year, we have been able to shift to more efficient ways of working. We have moved from a uniquely complex operation to a more streamlined response. All subnational hubs now report to Damascus, and our new humanitarian coordinator arrived last week. While we continue to bring in critical assistance from Turkey, this month we will complete the shift from the previous cross-border operation to more standard use of commercial mechanisms, reflecting the normalization of procurement and supply routes in Syria. Let me extend my appreciation here to Turkey for their facilitation of the cross-border operations. More than 65,000 UN trucks since 2014, which provided a lifeline to millions of people in need. Today, we are able to reach more people in more places more easily, and we have strengthened regular and practical engagements with the government in Damascus and at the local level on a range of areas, including making humanitarian procedures for the UN and NGOs more efficient, organizing more rigorous needs assessments, developing a national contingency plan, and technical support across a range of sectors. Because of these improvements and using this moment of change in Syria to focus our efforts in line with the humanitarian reset, we have been able to reach 3.4 million people per month, 25% more than last year, despite lower levels of funding. This includes mobilizing to respond to new needs as well as existing ones. But with our humanitarian appeal for 2025 only 30% funded, there are millions more people that we cannot help. This shortfall continues to cause reductions or disruptions in critical assistance and difficult prioritization decisions. Donors continue to provide generous support, and here allow me acknowledge the EU, the UK, and the US as the largest donors to our humanitarian appeal this year. Last week, the Emergency Relief Coordinator also allocated $18 million for Syria through the Central Emergency Response Fund. Our teams are completing a first countrywide multi-sector needs assessment, as well as updated food security and nutrition assessments, which will underpin an even more targeted and prioritized response plan for 2026, which we will issue in the first quarter of the year. But we know needs will remain immense next year, and without a reversal in the downward funding trend, more and more people will fall behind, and the task for recovery will only grow. Mr. President, my colleagues in Syria recently spoke with Rawa, a single mother who returned from Turkey with her 2 children to her village in Hama. She dreams of starting a small business with which, she said, she could finally offer her children the future they deserve. Her story echoes those of countless more women across Syria who want to rebuild their lives and help their country recover. We owe it to them to give them that chance. It is rare that a crisis of Syria's magnitude is presented with such a potential turnaround. The past year has provided cause for encouragement for us to redouble our efforts. We must seize the moment. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, we'll go for another break. We'll be back shortly.
When you choose your adventures, you do so with an open heart and a desire for the unexpected. You embark on journeys to discover new worlds full of wonder. You choose a path to awaken your senses, a world to make you look up and realize just how inspiring this life can be. Arrive and awaken your heart. Explore life in ways only thought possible in your dreams. Discover just how far you go to expand your understanding of life's greatest mysteries. There's just one place on this planet with so much to offer. Now is the time for you to have the royal experience.
All right, welcome back. We mark the end of our first ever episode of 2026. And as we say goodbye, we also say Happy New Year. We hope that it's going to be a beautiful one for everyone who is a KBS viewer, but also for